The auction room was silent when the door finally opened, and that silence would later be remembered as the moment everything changed. No one knew that inside the forgotten ship waiting in the impound bay slept a secret older than most civilizations, and that the one person curious enough to step inside would force the entire galaxy to rethink what humans were capable of. Elias Ward never planned to change history. He only wanted to survive another week. He worked as an independent salvage pilot on the outer trade stations where broken ships and abandoned cargo became opportunity. Business had been bad for months. Larger companies had taken the profitable contracts, leaving scraps for people like him. His ship needed repairs, his savings were almost gone, and creditors were starting to send messages that sounded less polite each day. That was why he entered the auction house on Meridian Station. The building looked forgotten. Dust covered the entrance sensors, and the holographic sign flickered like it was tired of existing. Inside, only a few buyers sat scattered across old chairs. A tall insect-like trader cleaned its antennae. A blue-skinned student stared at her tablet, clearly bored. No one looked excited. Elias almost left. Then the auctioneer announced the final item. A decommissioned vessel. Origin unknown. Registry corrupted. Name listed as Aurora's Echo. Starting bid, 200 credits. A ship for 200 credits was suspicious. Ships cost thousands even when damaged. Elias leaned forward. A small image appeared above the podium. The vessel looked strange. Smooth hull, no visible weapons, no known manufacturer markings. It did not look broken. It looked abandoned. No one raised a hand. The auctioneer sighed. Any bids? Elias hesitated. His instincts told him something was wrong. But desperation was louder than caution. 200, he said. The room barely reacted. Sold, the auctioneer said immediately, almost relieved. 20 minutes later, Elias stood alone in the impound bay, staring at his purchase. The ship was medium-sized, dark silver, covered in faint patterns that shifted when viewed from different angles. The metal looked new despite records saying it had been inactive for decades. The dock manager handed him an access chip quickly. Most owners return it, the manager muttered. Why? Elias asked. The manager shrugged. They say it feels like the ship is watching them. Then he walked away. Elias laughed quietly. Ships didn't watch people. Ships were machines. Still, when he placed the access chip into the hull panel, he felt a strange tension in his chest. The door opened with a soft breath of air. Inside, the ship was clean. Too clean. No dust, no decay. Soft white lights activated as he stepped forward, following him through the corridor like the ship knew where he was going. The design made no sense. The interior seemed larger than the outside dimensions allowed. He reached the bridge first. Unknown symbols covered the controls, but when his fingers brushed the console, the displays shifted into human language. Adaptive interface detected, a calm voice said. Elias froze. Who said that? No answer came. Only silence. He continued exploring, curiosity slowly replacing fear. The living quarters were intact. The engines appeared functional. Everything looked ready to fly. Why would anyone abandon this? Then he opened the final door. The cargo bay should have been small. Instead, it stretched endlessly. Grass covered the floor. Trees grew beneath a ceiling filled with artificial sunlight. Water flowed through narrow streams. The air smelled fresh, like rain after a storm. Elias stood there in shock, unable to understand how such a space could exist inside a ship. At the center stood a tall structure made of glowing crystal. Something moved inside it. A figure. Humanoid, but not human. Elias stepped closer, heart racing. The being inside looked asleep, surrounded by soft blue light. The moment his hand touched the crystal surface, the entire ship vibrated. Lights flared. The garden responded as if waking from a long dream. And then a voice spoke directly into his mind. Curiosity detected. At last. Elias stumbled backward. Who are you? I am the vessel, the voice replied calmly. And you, human, are the first in many years who did not turn away. The crystal began to glow brighter. Cracks spread across its surface like lightning frozen in glass. Elias should have run. Every survival instinct told him to leave. But humans had always moved toward the unknown, not away from it. The crystal opened. The being inside stepped forward, tall and pale, eyes reflecting light like mirrors. She looked at Elias with confusion and wonder. "A human," she said softly. "Earlier than expected." Elias swallowed. "Yeah, we surprise people." The being studied him carefully, then smiled faintly. "Good," she said. "Because the galaxy is about to need that." And in that moment, Elias realized he had not bought a ship. He had opened a story that had been waiting thousands of years to continue. The being called herself Lyra. She explained that the ship was not a warship or cargo vessel, but an archive, a moving sanctuary created by an ancient civilization that believed no culture should ever truly disappear. Inside the ship were preserved memories, art, languages, and knowledge from species that no longer existed. Elias struggled to understand the scale of it. Entire civilizations, gone from the galaxy, survived only inside this vessel. Humans, Lyra explained, were unexpected. Her people had predicted humanity would take centuries longer to reach interstellar space. Yet here Elias stood, proof that humans advanced faster when driven by curiosity and struggle. The ship itself, called Aurora's Echo, confirmed her words. It had tested many owners over the years. Most sensed something strange and left. Fear pushed them away. Humans, however, often stayed when things became strange. That difference mattered. But the ship was dying. Its power core was failing after thousands of years of operation. Without repair, the archive would shut down permanently. Every preserved culture would vanish forever. Lyra spoke calmly, but Elias heard the sadness beneath her voice. Saving the ship required a rare energy component now controlled by a powerful interstellar authority known as the Union. The Union believed resources should serve the living, not preserve the past. Archive ships like this one were considered wasteful. If they discovered what Aurora's Echo contained, they would dismantle it. Elias walked through the garden again, listening to alien music carried by the wind. He watched images of extinct worlds shimmer in memory pools. He thought about Earth, its wars, mistakes, and beauty. Humans preserved stories too. Not because they were practical, but because they mattered. "We save it," Elias said finally. Lyra looked at him. "How?" Elias smiled slowly. "Humans negotiate differently." Instead of stealing the component, Elias planned something risky. He would offer the Union something they did not have: unrestricted access to humanity's cultural archive. Music, literature, art, history. The emotional record of an entire species still growing. Lyra was surprised. "You would share this?" Elias nodded. "Stories get stronger when shared." For the first time since waking, Lyra looked hopeful. And Aurora's Echo adjusted its course toward Union space. The Union headquarters was visible long before Aurora's Echo reached it. It floated in space like a silver sun, surrounded by thousands of ships moving in perfect order. Cargo vessels, military escorts, diplomatic cruisers, everything moved with precision. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing looked uncertain. Elias noticed that immediately. Humans were used to chaos. Earth had never been perfectly ordered. Cities grew unevenly. Cultures mixed. Mistakes happened. Progress came from trial and error. But the Union Station looked different. It looked controlled, efficient, and emotionally distant. Lyra stood beside him on the bridge, watching the massive structure grow larger through the viewing window. "My people visited this place long ago," she said quietly. "Even then, they valued efficiency above memory." Elias crossed his arms. "That might make this harder." "Yes," Lyra replied. "Or impossible." Elias did not answer. Humans had heard the word impossible many times before. It rarely stopped them. When they docked, the difference between humans and the Union became even clearer. The halls of the station were enormous and clean, filled with beings from many species, yet the atmosphere felt cold. Conversations were short and practical. No one laughed. No one stopped to admire anything. Everything had a purpose. Elias felt like he had walked into a machine. Union officials received them in a tall chamber made of smooth white metal. Several representatives sat behind a curved platform, observing Elias carefully. Their expressions were neutral, almost unreadable. A human salvage pilot standing before some of the most powerful administrators in known space should have felt intimidated. Elias did feel nervous. But he also felt determined. "You claim to have something valuable to trade," said the lead administrator, a tall being with translucent skin and glowing eyes. "Explain." Elias nodded and activated his data display. "I'm not offering technology," he said. "I'm offering culture." The representatives exchanged confused looks. Lyra watched silently. She knew this moment mattered more than any battle. Elias began simply. He played a piece of human music, soft at first, then growing powerful. The sound filled the chamber. Some officials shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward slightly, unsure why they were reacting at all. "When humans struggle," Elias explained, "we turn it into stories. Music. Art. We don't erase pain. We transform it." The music ended, leaving an unexpected silence. One official spoke. "This serves no functional purpose." Elias smiled slightly. He had expected that answer. "Maybe not," he said. "But it helps people survive." He showed images next. Paintings created during wars. Books written during disasters. Films made during times of uncertainty. Each example showed humanity's strange habit of creating beauty when life was hardest. The Union representatives studied the data carefully. Their civilizations had advanced through logic and stability. Emotional expression had slowly become less important over generations. Efficiency replaced tradition. Progress replaced reflection. Human culture felt messy to them. And alive. One representative finally spoke again. "Why preserve extinct cultures? They failed. Resources should support the living." Lyra stepped forward for the first time. Her voice remained calm, but there was pain behind it. "They did not fail," she said. "They ended. There is a difference." The room fell quiet again. Elias realized this was the real conflict. The Union feared the past because it reminded them that even powerful civilizations could disappear. Humans feared forgetting. So Elias changed his approach. Instead of explaining, he asked Aurora's echo to assist. The lights dimmed slightly as the ship connected remotely to the chamber's systems. Suddenly, the air filled with images, not recordings, but experiences. Union officials saw alien children playing beneath unfamiliar skies. They heard languages no longer spoken. They felt celebrations, hopes, and final moments before extinction. It was not data. It was memory. One official gasped softly. Another lowered their head, overwhelmed by emotions they were not used to feeling. Elias spoke gently. "Every species believes it will last forever. None of them do. The only thing that survives is what we remember." The projection faded. For a long moment, no one spoke. The lead administrator finally looked at Elias differently. Not as a minor trader, but as a representative of something unexpected. "Your species is young," the administrator said slowly. "Yet you place great value on emotional preservation." Elias shrugged. "We learned the hard way. Humans almost destroyed ourselves more than once. Stories helped us remember who we wanted to be." Lyra watched the officials carefully. She could see hesitation growing among them. Curiosity. Doubt. The first cracks in certainty. But agreement did not come easily. Some Union leaders argued that humanity's offer was manipulation. Emotional influence. They called it. Dangerous. Unstable. They suggested seizing Aurora's echo instead and studying it without negotiation. Security alerts quietly appeared across the station. Elias noticed Lyra tense beside him. This was going wrong. He realized then that logic alone would not win this argument. The Union understood technology and power. They did not yet understand humanity's greatest strength: connection. So Elias made one final decision. He authorized a limited public broadcast. Across Union networks, citizens suddenly experienced fragments of the archive: music, memories, and stories from lost civilizations. Not propaganda. Not persuasion. Just experience. The reaction spread instantly. Artists, scholars, and ordinary citizens began responding. Discussions erupted across networks. People questioned why such knowledge should be erased. Why beauty should disappear simply because it was no longer efficient. The Union leadership lost control of the narrative within hours. Lyra stared at Elias in disbelief. "You risked everything." Elias exhaled slowly. "That's how humans work. When something matters, we don't keep it locked away." Outside the station windows, ships continued moving in perfect order. But inside the Union, something had changed. For the first time in centuries, people were not thinking only about the future. They were thinking about memory, and the idea that maybe survival meant more than simply continuing to exist. Maybe it meant being remembered. And without realizing it, humanity had introduced a new idea to the galaxy: that stories could be stronger than power. The broadcast spread faster than anyone expected. Across Union space, billions of beings experienced memories that did not belong to them. They saw skies from worlds that no longer existed. They heard songs from species that had vanished thousands of years ago. They felt emotions preserved inside Aurora's echo: joy, fear, hope, and loss. For many, it was the first time they understood what extinction truly meant. And not everyone liked it. Inside the Union Council chambers, arguments erupted. Some leaders believed Elias had crossed a dangerous line. They accused humanity of emotional manipulation. Others argued that the archive had value beyond calculation. The Union had always been guided by logic and efficiency, but now something unpredictable had entered the system: emotion. Aurora's echo remained docked, surrounded quietly by security vessels. Officially, it was for protection. Unofficially, it was containment. Lyra stood on the observation deck, watching ships move outside the station. Her expression was calm, but Elias could feel the tension in her silence. "My people feared this outcome," she said softly. "When memory becomes powerful, those who fear change try to control it." Elias leaned against the railing. "Humans call that history." He tried to sound confident, but he knew the situation was dangerous. The Union was too powerful to fight directly. If they decided to take the ship, there would be nothing he could do to stop them by force. But humans rarely won through force alone. They won by changing the rules. The warning came suddenly. Aurora's echo alerted them that a Union enforcement fleet had been authorized to seize the vessel under emergency preservation law. Official reasoning claimed the archive posed a cultural destabilization risk. Unofficially, some leaders wanted control over the knowledge inside. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment. If they take the ship, they will separate the archives. Study them. Classify them. The meaning will be lost. Elias nodded slowly. He understood. Stories locked away became data. Data forgotten became silence. He thought about Earth again. About museums, libraries, and songs passed through generations. Humanity survived not because it avoided mistakes, but because it remembered them. "We don't fight them," Elias said finally. Lyra looked at him, surprised. "Then what do we do?" Elias smiled faintly. "We make it impossible for them to say no." Instead of preparing defenses, Elias made another risky decision. He asked Aurora's echo to open a controlled public access channel. Not full access, just enough for people across Union space to experience the archive voluntarily. Within hours, millions connected. Scholars studied lost languages. Musicians recreated ancient songs. Artists shared interpretations of extinct cultures. Entire networks filled with discussions about preservation and memory. The archive stopped being a hidden artifact and became something shared. Something alive again. Union officials quickly realized the problem. Seizing the ship now would mean taking away something citizens had already embraced. Public opinion shifted rapidly. Influential cultural groups began demanding legal protection for archive vessels. The conflict moved from military control to public debate. Lyra watched it unfold with disbelief. You turned their own society against the decision. Elias shrugged. Not against it. Just gave them something worth protecting. Still, the danger was not over. A hardline faction within the Union refused to accept the shift. They believed emotional influence weakened civilization. Without warning, they attempted to override station authority and lock down Aurora's Echo. Docking clamps activated. Power restrictions followed. The ship's systems dimmed. Lyra felt it immediately. They are trying to isolate us. Elias's heart raced. This was the moment everything could collapse. If the ship lost power again, the archive might not survive another shutdown. He forced himself to think clearly. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. Not the oldest. Not the most advanced. But they were adaptable. Elias contacted the public networks directly. Instead of accusing the Union or creating panic, he did something unexpected. He told a story. He spoke about Earth's early history. About times when humans destroyed knowledge out of fear, burning libraries, silencing ideas, erasing cultures. And how humanity later realized those actions only made them weaker. We learned that forgetting doesn't protect you, Elias said calmly in the broadcast. It only makes you repeat the same mistakes. The message spread faster than any argument. Citizens began questioning the shutdown. Media networks demanded explanations. Union leaders who supported preservation gained public backing. The hardline faction suddenly found themselves isolated. Pressure mounted from every direction. Within hours, the seizure order was suspended. Docking clamps released. Power returned to Aurora's Echo. Lyra exhaled slowly, relief visible for the first time since arriving at the station. You didn't defeat them, she said quietly. Elias shook his head. No. I reminded them what they might lose. Outside the viewing window, ships continued moving through space as before. But the atmosphere inside the station had changed. Conversations lasted longer. People stopped to discuss what they had seen. The idea of preservation, once considered inefficient, was now being taken seriously. Humanity had not forced change. It had inspired it. Lyra looked at Elias thoughtfully. Your species fights without weapons. Elias laughed softly. Oh, we have weapons. We just prefer not to use them. Aurora's Echo hummed gently beneath their feet, its system stabilizing. The archive was safe for now, but Elias knew something larger had happened. The galaxy had been reminded that progress without memory was fragile. And for the first time in thousands of years, the future and the past were no longer enemies. As the station lights reflected across the ship's hull, Lyra spoke again. The archivists believed one day a species would come that understood both survival and meaning. Elias looked out into the endless stars. Yeah, he said quietly. Turns out that species was us. The crisis ended quietly. There was no final battle, no explosions, and no victory parade. The Union simply released an official statement announcing that Aurora's Echo would remain independent under cultural preservation status. The seizure order was cancelled. The archive was recognized as a protected historical resource. To most of the galaxy, it looked like a small political decision. To Lyra, it meant the survival of thousands of years of memory. To Elias, it meant something more. It meant proof that humanity's way, messy, emotional, unpredictable, could change even the most rigid systems. The Chronal Core arrived 2 days later under heavy escort. Union engineers installed it carefully under Lyra's guidance. When the new core activated, Aurora's Echo trembled softly, like a living thing taking its first deep breath after a long illness. Lights brightened across the garden. The streams flowed stronger. The singing trees filled the air with music once again. The ship was alive. Lyra stood in the center of the archive, watching the light return to places that had nearly gone dark forever. For the first time since Elias met her, she looked at peace. "My people built these ships because we feared forgetting," she said quietly. "But we never imagined another species would help us protect them." Elias smiled. "Humans forget things all the time. That's why we write everything down." Lyra laughed softly. She had learned that human humor often carried truth inside it. News of what happened spread far beyond Union space. Other hidden archive vessels began sending signals, cautiously revealing themselves after centuries of silence. Many had stayed hidden, fearing destruction. Now they saw something new, cooperation instead of fear. Humanity had unintentionally changed the rules of the galaxy. Not through power, through perspective. Researchers, artists, and explorers from dozens of species requested access to Aurora's echo. Some came to study extinct technologies. Others came simply to listen to lost music or see worlds that existed only in memory. The archive stopped being a tomb of the past. It became a meeting place for the future. Elias found himself busier than ever. Instead of salvaging broken ships, he now helped organize cultural exchanges. Humans sent literature, films, and music to the archive. In return, alien histories were shared with Earth for the first time. The exchange surprised everyone. Humans adapted quickly to alien ideas, just as they always had. Earth artists began creating works inspired by alien cultures. Musicians mixed sounds from different species. Writers imagined histories that connected worlds separated by thousands of light-years. Creativity spread faster than technology ever had. Lyra watched it all with fascination. "Your species turns everything into stories," she said one evening as they walked through the garden. Elias nodded. "Stories help us understand things that are bigger than us." Lyra touched one of the silverleaf trees gently. Its leaves began to sing, harmonizing with distant human music playing from the archive systems. "For millions of years," she said, "we preserved what was lost. But humans, you make new meaning from it." Elias shrugged. "That's survival." But the greatest change came slowly. The Union itself began funding preservation programs. Archive ships were no longer seen as useless relics but as cultural foundations. Younger generations across many species grew curious about history again. They wanted to know where they came from, not just where they were going. The galaxy had not become peaceful overnight. Conflicts still existed. Differences still caused tension. But something important had shifted. Civilizations began talking to each other differently. They listened. One night, as Aurora's echo prepared to leave Union space, Elias stood on the bridge watching the stars. The ship felt different now, lighter, almost hopeful. "You could stay," Lyra said. "The Union offered you a permanent position." Elias shook his head slowly. "That's not really my style." "Then where will you go?" Elias smiled. "Out there," he said, pointing toward the endless dark beyond the station lights. "There are probably more forgotten places. More stories waiting to be found." Lyra studied him for a moment, then nodded. She understood now. Humans were not driven only by survival or duty. They were driven by curiosity. Aurora's echo disengaged from the station and drifted into open space. Stars stretched into lines as the ship entered faster-than-light travel once more. Inside the archive, the preserved civilizations continued to exist, no longer alone. The ship systems recorded a new entry. Species: human. Classification: unpredictable. Observed traits: creativity under pressure. Emotional resilience. Cooperative instinct. Conclusion: high cultural preservation value. Elias laughed when Lyra read it aloud. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about us." The ship's voice spoke softly through the bridge, calm and ancient. "Correction. Observation incomplete. Humanity continues to evolve." Elias leaned back in his chair, watching new stars appear ahead of them. That was the truth about humans. They were never finished. They failed, learned, adapted, and tried again. They turned fear into curiosity and loss into stories. Where other species saw endings, humans saw beginnings. Aurora's echo jumped into the unknown, carrying memories of the past and possibilities of the future together. And somewhere in the vast silence of space, another forgotten story waited for someone curious enough to open the door. Because as long as humans kept asking questions, the story would never truly end.